In the first video of this series, we introduced the topic of the origin of life and raised some questions that many people have assumed were answered. We promised that we'd address these questions in our follow-up videos, and here we are. As mentioned in the second video, abiogenesis is defined as the origin of life from non-living matter, literally meaning no biological origin. So, biology started from non-biological materials. This means that the attempts to explain abiogenesis rely purely on chemistry and physics. On the other hand, this theory of spontaneous generation, rebranded as abiogenesis, directly conflicts with the Law of Biogenesis, which is a scientific law that states that the development of life comes only from pre-existing life. The foundation of this law is based on actual research and observation, both in the laboratory and in nature, and has tons of supporting evidence. So, in nature, molecules have not been observed to be evolving towards life in even the simplest of forms, and after so many years of using the latest advanced technology, attempts to create a living cell using perfect lab conditions have failed. This already doesn't look good for a hypothesis claiming to be scientific. Let's look at 3 famous hypotheses attempting to prove abiogenesis. Number 1. Primordial soup. The mixture of inorganic and organic molecule compounds within water on primitive Earth is what is referred to as prebiotic or primordial soup. According to the heterotrophic theory set forth by biochemist Alexander Oparin in 1924, organic compounds essential for life forms were produced on primitive Earth under prebiotic conditions. In his paper entitled Origin of Life, J.B.S. Haldane wrote the following: when ultraviolet light acts on a mixture of water, carbon dioxide, and ammonia, a vast variety of organic substances are made, including sugars and apparently some of the materials from which proteins are built up. Before the origin of life, they must have accumulated until the primitive oceans reached the consistency of hot dilute soup. Did you note the words, apparently, and, must have? One of the problems this theory faces is the presence of oxygen. Oxygen causes oxidation, which in turn causes degradation. But, doesn't our atmosphere consist of 21% oxygen? Therefore, supporters of the abiogenesis hypothesis have confidently concluded that the atmosphere during the prebiotic period must have had a reduced atmosphere, without oxygen. These scientists have suggested that the atmosphere 3.5 billion years ago contained methane, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, ammonia, nitrogen, and water vapor. Quite different from our atmosphere today. However, what good is a theory without some proof? Geochemists who believe in the billions of years timeframe have not found any evidence of high levels of ammonia or methane. What they have found are oxidized materials in samples from what they believe are 3.8 billion years ago. They have also found organisms that were complex enough to photosynthesize from 3.7 billion years ago. Their timelines seem to be a little bit different. Also, Hiroshi Omoto, professor of geochemistry from Penn State, researched red jasper cores and concluded, not only did the oceans contain abundant oxygen then, but that the atmosphere was as oxygen-rich as it is today, according to geologists. There is no evidence for this proposed reduced atmosphere, and is even contrary to the scientific proof provided by other scientific disciplines. No matter how many chemicals you throw into water and zap with lightning, no living thing will wiggle out of there billions of years later. However, your soup will smell like rotten eggs. Number 2. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Some researchers have proposed that life began in submarine hydrothermal vents, where superheated subterranean water pours into the sea. Studies suggest that in the earliest stages of life's evolution, non-biological proton gradients, which require membranes, caused chemical reactions within primitive cells. However, this so-called primitive cell, which was basically a chemical broth trapped within a membrane, is very mysterious. The origin of these unique membranes is unknown, but for the hypothesis to be remotely valid, they needed to have existed. These special cells then later automatically learned how to produce their own gradients, and escaped the vents to colonize the rest of the ocean, and eventually, the entire planet. A big problem with this idea is the presence of water, which prevents many of the required reactions, like getting polymers. Furthermore, the extreme heat in deep-sea vents would accelerate the breakdown of any type of chemical formation. Science experiments are already showing that deep-sea vents are unlikely to be conducive to generating the material or information required for an even marginally functional cell. Even if primordial soup gets replaced with a primordial vent, science will continue to prove these theories highly improbable. Number 3. Clay, which is tough mud. This hypothesis suggests that clay, a seemingly infertile blend of minerals, might have been the birthplace of life on Earth as a breeding ground for chemicals which it absorbs like a sponge. Clay was suggested by John Bernal as a means of concentrating primitive biomolecules onto their surface to be available for further reactions. The following quotes were taken from Dan Luo, professor of biological and environmental engineering at Cornell for nanoscale science. In early geological history, clay hydrogel provided a confinement function for biomolecules and biochemical reactions. Over billions of years, chemicals confined in those spaces could have carried out the complex reactions that formed proteins, DNA, and eventually all the machinery that makes a living cell work. How these biological machines evolved remains to be explained. But David Deamer, emeritus professor of chemistry at the University of California in Santa Cruz said, "We are now testing Darwin's idea, but in hot little puddles associated with the volcanic regions of Kamchatka and Mount Lassen." He went on to say, "The results are surprising, and in some ways disappointing. It seems that hot acidic waters containing clay do not provide the right conditions for chemicals to assemble themselves into pioneer organisms. In our experiments, the organic compounds became so strongly held to the clay particles that they could not undergo any further chemical reactions." Alright, let's wrap it up. Firstly, concerning primordial soup, geochemists and geologists have made discoveries that disprove the reduced atmosphere hypothesis, thus making the formation of miraculous chemical to biological compounds impossible. Secondly, studies have shown that the water and heat present in the submarine hydrothermal vents would have made the proposed chemical reactions and formations impossible. Thirdly, experiments on clay have shown that the acidic waters and strong confinement function of clay particles actually prevent any hypothetical chemical reactions from taking place. Scientists themselves have disproven these hypothetical environments that were proposed to be conducive to spontaneous generation through observation and experiments, aka actual scientific study. This is a classic case of historical science not matching operational science. And yet, these scientifically disproven hypotheses remain as support for the miraculous event of abiogenesis. Perfectly formed functional living cells were born in chemicals. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed our video, don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons below.